I've got it, now you can too. It's the effing audacity. Now in a can.
Hello, my name is Renee Maxine Haas, and this is the effing audacity. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Constance Scharff. I'm thrilled to speak with you about your research on resiliency, which I understand began with an interest on bravery, one aspect of resiliency as a whole. Can you tell us how this all got started?
I've been working on two different projects. When we first met in New Zealand, I was looking at bravery from a very personal perspective. The book is called A Year of Living Bravely. And it began when one of my mentors said, "You're brave." And I thought, I don't know about that. And whenever someone gives, I mean, I say thank you, obviously, but whenever someone gives me a compliment or a criticism, I try it on for size, right? Like a loosely fit cloak. And I say, hey, does this feel authentic? Does this feel genuine? Whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. I may be unaware. Like we all have blind spots and shortcomings. So I think, okay, this is good. Yeah, maybe I'm brave. I don't know. But then a friend of mine passed away quite suddenly. And when I called her mother to express, my condolences and so forth, I said, your daughter was brave. And that put me on a year-long quest to go around the world. I went to 6 or 7 different countries looking at bravery. What is it to be brave? Not only for myself, with that, what my mentor had said about me, but also for other people. What does bravery or courage look like? And what's very interesting to me, because a lot of people said, well, bravery and courage are not synonymous. I was like, okay, well, they're generally used as synonyms. So just experiencing that. And I went to New York, I was in London, I was in Istanbul and Bucharest and all over New Zealand, Australia as well, really experiencing what is it to step outside of your comfort zone and do things that most other people don't do. Whether that's the inner work, because most people don't do the inner work, or whether that's going and doing things that take, a little bit of courage.
Your research began with an interest in bravery, and at some point, that expanded into resiliency. What drew you to make that expansion, especially in the lens of cross cultural and indigenous communities?
So, bravery is an important lens, but I think it's a narrow lens. And my research has always been in addiction and trauma, general mental and behavioral health. It was very interesting to go down that rabbit hole, but it was really too narrow. And so I became very interested because of my writing in addiction and trauma in indigenous responses to trauma, specifically climate change. Because as I've traveled the world and worked with different populations, I have found that there is a wealth of knowledge. Indigenous groups are generally willing to share if they recognize that you are not just straight up appropriating their information. And so I started something called the Human Resilience Project. That will be the book after A Year of Living Bravely. I'm just starting 10 nation 3-year research project on this. And what I'm looking for is, by comparing indigenous groups around the world and what they do for resilience, how can we improve our resilience anywhere in the world? Because if something is specifically cultural, a specific ritual or a dance or whatever, well, if you just wholesale appropriate that and throw that, say, in an addiction treatment center in the US, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe there are likely themes that you're going to see across cultural groups, or ways of looking at the world that are quite common across other groups. And then that information we could choose to use because that's all low cost or no cost. So, for example, one of the things we see in addiction treatment and in trauma treatment constantly is people who've given up on themselves. The I can't do it. I can't recover. I'm too far gone. There's no hope for me. Don't waste your time on me, doc. I'm a dead man. Well, if you believe that's true, that is true. That becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. So the stories that we tell ourselves are very important. So then, do we tell different stories? Other
Mm-hmm.
cultures tell different stories. And for example, you change your name in many, many different cultures throughout your life. As you change and grow, you change your name. I've been both to Kenya and back to New Zealand for the last expedition. And in both of those places, they are not making decisions for themselves. They make decisions based on generations to come. They make decisions based on the person who is not yet born. That's how they said it in New Zealand, which I quite liked that language. In North America, many groups would say 7 generations for the people you will never even know, right? That's not an
Mm.
American way of looking at things. That's not an American way of looking at things at all. And so, would we be more resilient in the United States if we didn't make decisions for ourselves or maybe our children? That's a very selfish worldview. That's what we would be told. But if we made decisions for the community based on those who are not yet born, it's a very different decision making process and it has very different outcomes. So, this is the kind of thing that we can learn through my research is not to undercut ourselves for our own greed, but to do better for those generations to come. That's a choice that we can make. Doesn't cost us anything. That's a choice that we can make.
So, what you're saying is it's elevating it beyond our own personal resilience and expanding it into resiliency of an entire community.
That's what we're learning in the research. Now, 2 expeditions into a 10-nation investigation. So I think it will. I mean, I've been to many of the places. I go places where I'm invited. And so now I'm on a research expedition where I'm being invited back to many of the places that I'm going. But so the Gabra in Kenya, their culture's dying, if not dead. It's shifting because of desertification. The desert is growing, the rains are failing, and they lost in the last significant drought, which was 2 years in duration. They're never that long. 85% of their camels. Camels do not have a very fast herd restoration rate. And so they don't have a livelihood anymore. They are settling in villages. They're no longer camel herders. What fundamentally makes them Gabra does not exist anymore. They've become Kenyans. Just like when immigrants come to the United States, they become Americans. They might be Gabra Kenyans, right? Just like you might be an Italian American or a Mexican American. You have that cultural heritage, but you're an American. But even in the loss of their culture, they show resilience and really wanted to share who it is that they are so that that isn't lost not only to people like me but to their children and their children's children. And they show incredible resilience. One of the things that they do is radical acceptance. Whatever is, and they don't fight it. So the camels died, children die, cultures change, people get sick, all sorts of adversity befalls people, and you just keep going. Another thing that I'm seeing is a common thread. That's not a common thread, by the way. Not everybody has radical acceptance. What we could learn from that. A common thread is reciprocity. I have yet to meet indigenous groups that don't have a deep sense of sharing. The Gabra cannot comprehend that if I have food and you don't, that we don't sit down and eat a meal together. If I have food and you don't, I can't eat my meal knowing that you're hungry. We will eat together. And tomorrow, if there's no food for both of us, well, then we'll figure that out tomorrow. But today, we share. That is highly un American. That is not what we do, right? They know what a billionaire is. They can't comprehend. They would like, why would any culture allow some people to be hungry and other people to have more resources than they could possibly use? They think it's disgusting. They can't comprehend why anyone would allow that to happen. Reciprocity is very important. So these are the kinds of themes that I'm rooting out by visiting these different groups.
When it comes to climate related issues and trauma that occurs because of that, we can potentially look at the Western world as being responsible for that and that we have a responsibility to these communities. And yet, it sounds like through your research, there's so much that they're giving to us in way of wisdom and ways that we can support each other and our fellow human being.
I don't think culturally we think that we do owe them anything, that we are the cause. There's a whole group of people who doesn't believe that climate change exists. I'm right now sitting at my mom's house on a farm that is radically different than when I grew up when I was a kid 4 decades ago here. The farm itself is different because the climate is different. We have wildfires here that we never had in the past. And when you talk to the native groups here, so I want to start from a point of not everybody agrees with that. That said, to the second part, these are people who are feeling the consequences of our actions.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is they just like to share because their cultures are based on sharing. I think they have they have to have some hope that we're going to be different and stop what we're doing that harms them, because we'll feel the consequences. We're having the wildfires and we're having the droughts and we're having the concerns about where's our food going to come from and all of these things related to climate change. So we'll feel it, but their cultures will be gone before that. We'll be the ones who have the last consequences.
One of the things you said was indigenous cultures are open to sharing their stories.
The ones that I'm working with who are inviting me in, right? That's not just indigenous cultures on the whole are not. They've been poked and prodded and investigated and lied to and used and abused, and on the whole they are not.
And I'm curious, how were you able to gain the trust to be invited into these communities?
I have been doing this for a long time. I'm more than 20 years. I've been investigating mental health. And because I travel so much, I have colleagues all over the world. I try to be of service. I mean, that's how we met. How can I help you? How can I be of service? I try to be of service to those. And so I have colleagues who are working with these communities for a long, long time. So in Kenya, for example, with the Gabra, 33 years ago, I was on a field course with a professor. I was living in Kenya for my undergrad with a professor who is continuing research with the Gabra. So I had been there before, I've worked with him before, and he vouched for me. He said, "This woman is going to do right by you." His team had everything set up. And then when I came in, I had to be everything he said that I would be. I had to be fair. They're so poor they don't have money. I don't usually pay for interviews, but I give a gift when they're this poor, right? And so I made sure that I gave the going rate. We honor them, and I don't come in, I don't want to have anything you don't want to give me. If you're not offering it, I'm not interested. I tell people what I'm doing. I'm very upfront. I let people know because I work with the Explorers Club and Rolex. I take a picture portraits of people. Not every community is down for that. And so I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to get funded for this, we have to have portraits. So I'm very clear. There's nothing surreptitious. And if you say no, it's no. The other thing that I do is, like I said, I try to be of service. I was in the Amazon in Ecuador and I was working with an indigenous community, and they weren't too impressed. The people, I didn't know them that well. I didn't have as strong of a lead in there, and they weren't too impressed with me. But I went to a women's cooperative, and they were cooking piranha for us for lunch. And while the piranha was cooking, they took us to the school and we spoke to the principal. And the principal was telling us what he needed to make the school better. And one of the things he needed was English and Spanish language books at all grade levels. He needed a library. He also wanted Quechua books. I said, books in Quechua I can't help with, but English and Spanish, I know loads of people who have books in English and Spanish. I said before the end of the year, I would be more than happy to bring a couple of my favorite books in English and Spanish. Well, the women were from the cooperative were hanging around because they followed us, and they're hanging around and listening. By the time we got back, they had called the shaman. He was on his way to come talk to me. I'd wanted to speak to him. They'd called the midwife. She had an interview with me the next day. Everything I wanted because I was willing to help them. They didn't have to give me anything. I would have helped the principal and given him these ideas. They don't cost me anything. I've seen it work other places, but they saw that I was invested in their community. And that's what makes the difference. I saw the need in Gabra. I saw this little girl that could be educated. I'm like, yes, we'll find her a spot at boarding school, right? I'm invested in them, and they give back to me or they don't. But it's in their nature to do so. And so they do.
It sounds like you're deeply guided by service to others.
That's to me is the baseline, right? And that's why when I meet people, I'm like, how can I be of service? How can I help you? What is it that I can do to support you? And then if I can't do it, if I don't have those resources or that ability, I'm going to be straight up and be like, I don't have that. But there's lots that I can do. And I don't usually know until I get there. Like in Ecuador, I didn't know they were going to ask me about, how to build a library. Oh, I can help you fill a library in your situation. Absolutely. I have that resource. So I'm going to give it to you.
Very. I can see you're meeting them with shared values, that of reciprocity, one of their motives within their community.
Yes. And if you combine that with this concept of we're making decisions for those who are not yet born, because one of the things I heard over and over and over among the Maori in New Zealand is that they were so grateful for the decisions that their ancestors made, the ones who wrote the treaty and who pushed them to use their language and fought against colonization in the ways that they did, and all these different things. There's so much gratitude. And I said, well, didn't they make mistakes? And they're like, I mean, maybe, but we wouldn't be where we are if they had not been thinking of us. And so now it is incumbent upon us to think about those to come. But you wouldn't have that worldview if you weren't early on taught about, oh, hey, how do my decisions affect other people?
I could see how some of these methods of resiliency can stack upon each other as well. There's the idea of radical acceptance of what has happened, good or bad, and moving from a place of acceptance while making decisions for the future.
Correct. Correct. So there's radical acceptance, there's reciprocity. We haven't talked about this, but there is a deep feeling, and again, I see this constantly across indigenous culture, that there is a deep connection to the land, and that the land and other beings are kin. So with the Gabra, the camels are their brothers. The camels are family, and the land is critically important to them. in the Amazon, right? Pachamama. The earth is a goddess, not in the sense of the, sort of idolatry that we, in the West give. It's a recognition of the land and the ecosystem as something that is alive and deserves our care. Pele in Hawaiian culture, and it moves out into the Pacific as well, but really it's not just volcano worship. That's a gross oversimplification. It's a radical understanding that this little rock that we live on, the Hawaiian island, is living, and that we are part of it. And this notion in the West that we are separate from that which is around us, and the commodification and use of land and people as resources is something that the indigenous cultures that haven't had a lot of experience with Westerners find confusing, and those who don't find it confusing generally find it distasteful. The cultures I've come in contact with can't understand, for example, how we would kill something to extinction, that there wouldn't be stewardship.
I find your work incredibly compelling, and I wanted to know what's next for you and where can people find more about you and the work you're doing?
So I have just released a new addiction and trauma treatment book that has some of these concepts in it. It's called Experiencing Transcendence, and it's available now. I am currently looking for a publisher for A Year of Living Bravely, that first book project of mine, and I'm doing the research for the Human Resilience Project. So to learn more about that research, that storytelling, that work, go to thrproject.com.
Thank you so much for meeting with me. I absolutely loved all of the insights that you brought about bravery and resilience and just culture and sharing your story.
Well, thanks. And I just, as a parting word, I just want people to know there's hope. There are communities all over the world who are doing everything they can to promote health and healing. In my work with addiction and trauma, I want people to know that we're doing everything we can to promote health and healing. And so whatever it is that you would like to change, there's hope. You can do it.